So, is God totally simple without any parts whatsoever? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Channel summary of the Summa Theologica. Today we're in Part 1, Question 3, Article 7, Whether God is Altogether Simple. So we've already looked at a number of ways in which Thomas has said that God can't have parts. This article is all about sort of bringing it all together and saying, now, yes, there are no ways at all that God could have parts. God is radically simple. He has no parts, including metaphysical parts. And to start off, in laying out this position, he quotes Augustine in the De Trinitate. God is truly and absolutely simple. Truly and absolutely simple, meaning has no parts. So argument one for this position lists out basically all the different articles that came before this in this question that showed different ways that God could have parts. And he says, look, we saw in all these different articles how God could not have parts in these ways, so therefore God couldn't have parts at all. So premise one, there is not composition of quantitative parts in God because he is not a body. Two, there is no composition of matter and form in God. Again, something we've seen in a previous video. Three, his nature does not differ from his suppositum. 4, his essence does not differ from his existence. 5, there is not in him composition of genus and difference. 6, there is not in him composition of subject and accident. 7, so we went through all the different types of compositions there are. So God is in no way composite. So he is altogether simple. Argument 2, from first being. Every composite is posterior to its component parts and is dependent upon them. When you think about a thing that is composed of parts, the parts come first. The parts are what give rise to the composite thing. But 2, God is first being. And we saw this in Part 1, Question 2, Article 3. And if God is first being, then his parts couldn't come before him. Right? He couldn't be posterior to his parts. So God must be absolutely simple. Argument 3, things in themselves different cannot unite unless something causes them to unite. So if the two things are different, the question then is, what makes them come together? What makes them become one? What gives them union? So every composite has a cause, but God is the first efficient cause. Same article again, that Part 1, Question 2, Article 3. So God is uncaused, and therefore God must not be composed of different parts, so God must be simple. Argument 4, in every composite, you have one of two possibilities. One is that you could have it be the case that one part is actualized by another part. One part is potential, and that potential is actualized by another part. Or at the very least, you have that all the parts are potential to the whole. But two, in every composite, there must be potentiality and actuality. But there is no potentiality in God, as we've seen in a previous article. So therefore, God cannot have parts. God cannot be a composite thing. And then argument 5, in a whole made up of dissimilar parts, the composite cannot be predicated of the parts, obviously. So when you have a thing that is made up of parts that are not, so when he says dissimilar parts versus similar parts, a thing made up of similar parts would be like a body of water. When you say this doesn't actually have water in it, but if this had water in it, when you say this water in here, a part of this water is water, right? Like it's kind of like the whole is just a bunch of a collection of parts that are just like the whole. Whereas when we look at, for example, my calculator here, my calculator is made up of parts that are dissimilar because, it's got, the whole is made up of different like buttons and keyboards and batteries and all kinds of other things, right? So it's not just like a collection of mini calculators, right? The parts are not mini calculators. That's what he means by similar and dissimilar parts. So if you have something that is dissimilar, then of course you can't predicate the whole to the parts. You can't say, for example, a part of a man is a man, he says, right? Like you can't say, like, my finger is a man, right? Or you can't say the part of the foot is a foot. So like, in the same way that you could say like part of water is water. That's what he means. And so that's obvious. Now, when it comes to a whole made up of similar parts, there are some things which predicated of the whole may be predicated of a part. So again, you can say part of the water is water or part of the air is air. However, in a whole made up of similar parts, certain things are predicable only of the whole. So for example, this is 12 fluid ounces. Part of this water would not be 12 fluid ounces, right? If the whole thing is 12 fluid ounces, then a proper part of this water would not be 12 fluid ounces. So you can't say that every single property of the whole is predicable of each part of the whole. So in every composite, there is something which is not it itself, right? In every composite, there is something, the part, that is not the whole. So nothing composite can be predicated of any single one of its parts. You can't say that the whole is predicable of the parts totally. Now, in the form itself, there is nothing besides the form itself. And again, this is part of hylomorphism. If you're still confused on that, check out my video on that, what the difference between matter and form is. But he says this is the case even if you could say that a form has something which is not itself, which is not it itself. So even if it has something which is not it itself, so for his example is in a white object, there is something which does not belong to the essence of white, let's say. Even so, in the form of white, right, there is nothing but white, right? It's not like there's some admixture of something else. But God is absolute form, or rather absolute being, so God can be in no way composite. So again, it's the idea here is that the form is not like a composite. The composites, you can't predicate them of any of their parts, but the form is nothing but the form. You can predicate the form of its parts because the form is it's the form. That's all there is. There are no parts. And if God is nothing but form, then God has got to be completely simple. So that's the argument. And he says that Hilary implies this argument in his De Trinitate when he says, God who is strength is not made up of things that are weak, nor is he who is light composed of things that are dim. So he says that sort of foreshadows, adumbrates this argument. Okay, let's look at the objections. Objection 1, whatever is from God must imitate him. And his support here is that from the first being are all beings, and from the first good is all good, right? So anything from God must imitate God. 2, in the things which God has made, nothing is altogether simple. Then we've already seen an objection that's similar to this. So God is not altogether simple. So in other words, things that come from God imitate God, but if they're imitating God and they're not simple, then God must not be simple. You can imagine that this style of argument really can't go that far because, if they're imitating God and they're doing evil things, does that mean God is evil? No, that can't be right. There's got to be something wrong with that argument. So anyway, reply to this objection. Whatever is from God imitates him as caused things imitate the first cause, right? So they imitate him in a particular way. They imitate him as caused things do, imitate the first cause. But 2, in a caused thing, at least its existence differs from its essence. And this is something that's going to be shown later on in question 4, article 3. So it is of the essence of a cause thing to be in some sort composite. So in other words, they imitate God, but they imitate him in a particular way, right? They imitate him in the way that they're supposed to imitate him, or the way that they can imitate him. And this is in a particularly limited way, specifically in a composite way, which, is a way that's different than God is, right? They also imitate him in a limited way in which God is actually unlimited. The fact that they imitate him doesn't mean that they imitate him perfectly. They imitate him in the way that they can imitate him. That's sort of the idea here. Objection 2, whatever is best must be attributed to God. 2, with us, that which is composite is better than that which is simple. And he gives a couple examples here. Chemical compounds are better than simple elements. 2, animals are better than the parts that compose them. So God is not simple. So chemical compounds, when you have elements and you start mixing them together, you can make some very useful things. And then animals are better than just parts of animals. So that's the idea. His reply to this is, with us, composite things are better than simple things, because the perfections of created goodness cannot be found in one simple thing, but in many things. In other words, when it comes to us, sure, when we're talking about composite things, when we're talking about things that must be composite, of course, they are going to be best when found as composites, because that's the way they are, right? But the perfection of divine goodness is found in one simple thing. And this is something we're going to see in a further question 4, article 1, and question 6, article 2. So God is simple. In other words, that's just the way composite things are. The way composite things are is such that their goodness is tied to their composition, but God is not tied to his goodness is not tied to his composition, because he is absolutely simple. So we don't need to, we don't draw the same conclusion from that. That's the idea here. We have one more article left in this question, and that is to see, now that we know that God does not have any parts, can God be a part of other things? So that's the next article. Please don't forget to support this project at my Patreon page, link in the description. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.